so exciting to see that you had the book The Emperor and the Endless Palace and getting good reviews.
Thank you. Thank
Um,
you.
what was that point? And I actually saw your stuff on Instagram. So what was that point where you said, okay, it's time to become a novelist and get this book started and your inspiration and process of writing The Emperor and the Endless Palace?
Yeah, I would say so. The publishing landscape is so competitive that I think you need to have a fair amount of delusion to think that you're going to become a novelist. I just wanted to write this story because I just felt like it's a story that needs to be told, like this emperor who really did exist, really did fall in love with one of the men in his court in 4 BCE, and their love was so profound that and intense that it brought down the first Han dynasty. I mean, if that's not a great hook for a book, that and I don't know what is. And I figured it might as well be me that writes it, right? But on a personal level, also, as a queer Asian person, when I first heard of this story, it was so healing to me because
Mhm.
often queer folks in Asian societies and many other societies were ostracized or were made to feel less than. And this true history of this emperor proved to me that I'm actually descended from like the noblest of lineages. And so telling this story, hopefully, lets other folks who feel similarly to me find self-love and, find that, like find self-love, basically. Yeah, find self-love.
So would you consider yourself when you decide, hey, I'm gonna take on this subject matter, do you consider yourself a hopeless romantic or whatnot?
I love that question. I'm not a hopeless romantic that much. I'm very Capricorn. I'm very ambitious. My whole life, all I cared about was my career. I was a film exec before I published this novel, and that's a world in which you need to be on your A game all the time. Which I think is reflected by the journey of one of my characters, who's this like young, ambitious, like lowly clerk in a palace who sets off to seduce the emperor, and he's like wheeling and dealing with all these politics. That actually more reflects who I am as a person. At the same time, I love love. I love when I love seeing it. I love hearing when friends fall in love. I love meeting who they're in love with. It's something I really hope for myself and something I'm really working on. I'm nearing 40 and I do want to have a family and I do want to have a partner. So, I don't think a few years ago I would have said that I'm in a romantic mode like this, but something about putting this book out, which in many ways is a reflection of my own romantic experiences. I think I'm starting to cross into hopeless romantic territory. We'll see what happens.
That's a good thing. I've been single forever in my life too. But
Yeah.
but anyways, when you think about the three different timelines, how were you able
Mm.
to commingle all together into this book and ensure that you don't get lost in the journey of telling the story?
I mean, it's a great question. The three timelines need to feel drastically different from each other. Otherwise, they'll blend together and you'll be like, who is who, what is what? When I was writing each timeline, I gave each of them a different soundtrack. And then I would play that music when I was writing in that time period because you have 4 BCE, which I played. There's a movie called Lust Caution that Ang Lee directed, which has one of the most beautiful but like mysterious and like the soundtrack that's full of peril, but it's gorgeous classical music. So I wrote the 4 BC timeline to that. Then there's a timeline that takes place in the 1700s, and it's like a gothic fairy tale that takes place in the wilderness of China. And I actually wrote that soundtrack to the Twilight soundtrack because that's one of the most beautiful soundtracks ever as well. And by the way, composed by the Lust Caution soundtrack and the Twilight soundtrack are composed by the same person, which is really interesting. But in the modern day timeline, I listened to just like current music and just like it brought me into writing in a space where people sound modern and people think modern and all those things. Yeah. Another way that I made sure that every timeline stayed very separate of each other until I wanted them to start blending together was that I I discovered that it wasn't fair of me to expect my reader to remember what happened 2 timelines ago. unless I ended each timeline with a very memorable cliffhanger, which is why the book becomes this twisty, sort of like sort of teeter-tottering book full of cliffhangers. So I think it worked out for the best. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it does sound like it, especially with all the accolades you're getting. Now I don't know if this is too early to say, but what if you got a movie or a streaming deal? Would you rather it to be a movie or would you rather it to be a series? And maybe you got a NDA, but who would you want to play the different characters? Loaded
Okay, this is
question.
hard. Yeah, I don't know. I would say okay. So when I will say this, when I was writing this, I pictured it in my head as a TV series. And as for who would play these characters, I think that the beauty of it seems like every day in Hollywood, you're seeing like amazing AAPI talent appear. There's so many like discoveries of like talented Asian American actors coming out of the woodwork. I think it'd be great if we find like because like ultimately my dream is that if we did do something like this, the two lovers, they would be played by the same characters in all three timelines. So and what a fun role to play drastically different characters across 2000 years. I bet at least one of them will be a discovery. I bet at least one of these boys will be a discovery.
It sounds like it reminds me of back in the day with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour.
Yes. Oh my
So
gosh, that's really good
yeah.
reference.
I would
Yeah,
love
for
to
sure.
see it come out as a series. And lastly, what would you
Yeah.
want your readers to get out of the reading the novel? What's your message, or just what would you want them to expect from it?
I think that because there's really, if any, there's very, very, very few, if any, books that's like romantic books that star queer Asian leads. So, so and that gives me a lot of pride to sort of like help crack that glass ceiling. But most importantly to me as a storyteller is entertaining the hell out of someone who bothers to pick up one of my books and give me a chance. Like that's what I'm here for. I'm here to entertain. And if I can also make you feel something, even if even if you're like screaming at the book, I've made you feel something in this world that's now just like mindless scrolling on screens and feeling like we're disconnected from each other. I just want to entertain and I want you to feel something with me. That's it.